Hello and welcome to Form Controls Tutorial Part 3. This is the third and final tutorial we have on form controls. And if you have not yet watched Part 1 and Part 2 of this Form Controls tutorial series, I suggest you do so before watching Part 3. In Part 3, we're going to be talking about radio button and checkbox input controls. Okay, and the first one we're going to be talking about are radio buttons. You've probably seen radio buttons on websites before, on web forms. They allow you to select one thing and one thing only in a group. In this tutorial, we have gender, and we have the ability to select three things: male, female, and undeclared. Notice you can only select one thing and one thing only. They're called radio buttons because when radios were, especially car radios, and I think even older radios, they had these buttons on them, and you can only push one button in at a time. So if you wanted to listen to, some particular radio station, you'd push that button, and that radio station would play. And again, only one button would stay, on, and the others would be off, just like the web radio button right here. Sorry about that little bit of trivia there, but again, only one item can be selected at a time. And anytime you start running into problems with the radio button, right, with a radio button in general, it probably has to do with the name attribute, okay? And I'll show you this code in a second. But notice when I hover over this, right, it brings me up the title. And I think you remember that IDs and titles are very important for accessibility. I just wanted to remind you of that. Now, let's go look at the markup. So here's the markup, and notice right here I have, I have three inputs of type radio. Then I have three labels. I have a label for each one of those radio buttons. Let's dissect this input statement right here on this line right here. So input and the type equals radio, attribute, type, value, radio. The next thing, and this is important, that the name attribute equals gender 2. Okay? See how this one equals gender 2, this radio button has gender 2, and this radio button has a name of gender 2? That means that they all go together. They all go together. And when the server, the web server, receives this form, when it's posted to the web server, it's going to, the name of the thing it's going to be looking for is gender 2, and the actual value that's submitted to the server is going to be these things right here. Value equals male, value equals female, or value equals undeclared. Notice when I first showed you the radio buttons that the third one was checked. And notice this attribute right here. Checked equals checked. Okay, that means that radio button is highlighted. And you're always going to have a checked radio button by default. Okay, that's a best practice. The next thing I want you to do is take a look at, again, the ID and title. Again, ID equals male, ID equals female, and ID equals undeclared. If you remember that, from the exercises and project work that you've done before, that every element on a web page can only have an ID assigned to it one time. Actually, what I really mean is that you can only use the ID equals male on a page only once. You cannot use on another element ID equals male anywhere else. The same thing with ID equals female, ID equals undeclared. These are all unique. So please just remember that. Let's see. The other thing I wanted to talk about just one more time was to show you, okay, see how, again, when I hover over these things, right, it's giving me the title, and that's for accessibility if someone can see the screen. And when I submit this form, notice it says gender 2, right? That's the name of the input, the radio button, and the value submitted was female because that's the one that I selected. So let's talk about checkboxes now. here are the checkboxes. Notice that I don't have any checked by default. Well, you could have some checked by default. I just want you to know that. I have, again, let's look at the markup. We have input type equals checkbox. Right before we were dealing with input type equals radio. We have a name, membership to open and close bracket. When you're working on our web server, and checkboxes, your names are going to have to look like this with the open and closing brackets there. Just remember that. The other thing, and notice, by the way, they're all the same. They're all membership to. Notice that they each have unique IDs, right? ID equals moose, elks, IOOF, and NRA, and other. And the values, again, these are the things that are going to be submitted to the server, the actual value, right? And notice, too, that none of them have this checked attribute and checked value like we did in the radio button, okay? The thing that we need to do now is we need to preview this, and I need to select, let's select moose and elks. And if I submit this, notice how gender 2 is undeclared, because that's what the radio button was set to. And under membership 2, it's one or more things. So I selected moose and elks. If I go back and I just select moose, I'll hit submit. Notice now it's just moose. I'll go back one more time and I'll select everything, right? Except other. Other doesn't really make any sense here because we really don't give the user to type anything else. But if I were to click other, I would probably have just clicked, other. Okay? So let me do that. Let me just select all these and hit submit. And notice, moose, elks, IOOF, and NRA. So there you have it. There is a quick tutorial on radio buttons and checkboxes. So let's, before I wrap up the video, I just want to show you the markup one more time. Okay? These are the labels. I'm not going to go over that right now, but these are the labels for each of the radio buttons. Type is the attribute. Radio is the value. They all have the same name. They all have different IDs. Their values are all different. Their titles are all the same. Again, titles and IDs for accessibility. And if we go down to the checkbox, we have, the type equals checkbox. The name happens to be the same for all three, or all five, and they have this open and closing bracket after it. They all have a different ID. They have different values. Their title is all the same for accessibility. Thanks for watching the video series on form controls. If you have any ideas for videos that you want to see, contact your instructor.